Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I call to order the third meeting of the 12th session of the Conference of States Parties to the Convention on the Rights and Persons with Disabilities. My name is Pekka Puustinen. I'm head of Delegation of Finland and one of the co-chairs and co-chairing countries. We will now continue the general debate under item 5A of the agenda. I was informed that we still have a rather long list of speakers inscribed. I would appreciate all speakers observing the 3-minute limit for your statements. That way you would help all of us and this conference exhaust the inscribed list of speakers within the time frame. With this, I invite the representative of San Marino to make a statement. The floor is yours.
Mr. President, the Republic of San Marino was among the first countries to sign and ratify the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Since its ratification in 2008, the government of San Marino has been working on the implementation of the Convention, and several legal amendments have since been put in place. In 2015, the Republic of San Marino adopted a framework law for the assistance, social inclusion, and rights of persons with disabilities, with a general objective to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of the rights of all persons with disabilities. The San Marino Commission for the Implementation of the Provisions and Principles contained in the CRPD was also established. This body is working together with all the national institutions and with all sectors of civil society whose precious contribution continue to be essential for the improvement of the life of people with disabilities. This Commission has recently developed a national action plan for the promotion of the rights of people with disabilities. In particular, it is now focusing on social and political inclusion as well as full participation of disabled people in education and in the labor market. Together with the public sector, the Commission is working on the improvement of accessibility through the removal of architectural barriers and on the advancement of effectiveness of social and health services for disabled people and their families. Furthermore, in collaboration with the European Centre for Disaster Medicine and the San Marino Civil Protection Service, in order to guarantee safety to all its citizens, this Commission is planning to develop training courses for emergency interventions in cases of natural disasters, suitable for people with all types of disabilities. The government of San Marino believes that participation of people with disabilities in cultural and recreational life, leisure and sport is crucial for their inclusion. Our recent law for sport expressly promotes the participation in sport for people with mental and physical disabilities through the provision of services and barrier-free access venues, and it guarantees the participation of disabled athletes in the Paralympics and Special Olympics. People with disabilities are also given free access to several sport facilities. Mr. President, strengthening the CRPD and its implementation is fundamental for meeting the goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and for leaving no one behind. We will therefore continue to work for advancing this objective and for creating a more inclusive society for all. Thank you.
I thank the representative of San Marino, and now I invite the representative of Senegal to make a statement.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Senegal welcomes the holding of this 12th Conference of States Parties on UN CRPD. The main theme of the conference is to focus on inclusion strategies for persons with disabilities in a world which is in flux. And for my country, this provides us with an excellent opportunity to share the different initiatives being conducted in this area. In Senegal, social protection comes under Senegal's emerging plan, which focuses on human capital, social protection, and sustainable development, and seeks to have inclusive development by 2035. As part of improving living conditions of persons with disabilities, we've, in 2010, adopted legislation on a social approach to disability, This year, our initial report on this will be looked at by Geneva, by the Committee of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In protecting them and in consistency with the three sub-items, we have produced 50,006 digitalized equal opportunity cards in many sectors to help with financial and material questions. This equal opportunity card is a beacon program of the state which has been shared on a panel organized by Senegal and ILO on the eve of this 12th conference. Additionally, as part of implementation of Article 33 of the UN Convention, we've brought in a collaborative platform designating in our administration some ministerial focal points whose job it is to include disability in discharging public policy. In order to operationalize this platform, Senegal has organized from the 20th to 24th of May 2019 in partnership with the AU a training workshop of the focal points, sector by sector, on inclusion of persons with disabilities and a roundtable on statistics. Three major steps were identified to ensure optimal social protection of persons with disabilities. The first has to do with strengthening the political framework for oversight of public policy through the upcoming High Council meeting for the promotion and protection of the rights of persons with disabilities. The second one is based on priority mobilization of resources as part of phase 2 of the emerging plan for Senegal to finance the National Action Plan on Disability 2017 to 2021. The third one has to do on the prospects of producing 40,000 new equal opportunity cards by 2021. By sharing these measures that we've taken to include disability, Mr. Chairman, I would like to reaffirm our country's steadfast commitment for the respect and implementation of rights of persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of Senegal.
Invite the representative of El Salvador to make a statement, por favor.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. Chairman, we should like to express our gratitude for the hard work you've done to you and all states present in this 12th session of states parties to the CRPD. The National Council for Holistic Care for Persons with Disabilities, COSP12, is the guiding body for the follow-up and assessment of the national policy for people with disabilities and the CRPD in El Salvador. And it has promoted standards to strengthen the guarantee that there may be rights and progressive elimination of discrimination against those with disabilities. And there is also a bill dealing with inclusivity, which is at present before the Parliament. The CONAVI is aware that in the past those with the disabilities found it hard to access services, so the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology has implemented a program such as that of inclusive education. The main purpose of this is to provide opportunities for access, establishment and real learning at all educational levels to students with special needs and at social risks. More than 330,000 people have learned to read and write since 2010 with the National Literacy Program, which implements the strategy for educational focus on those suffering from hearing, visual, intellectual and motor disabilities. Mr. Chairman, we are implementing our commitment to provide true social protection. So by means of our Social Investment Fund for Local Development, FISDEL, we've implemented a program of social protection, which looks at a universal minimum pension for rural and city dwellers. In this way, 1,761 people in a rural environment and 471 in cities have benefited. And then a health education grant is given to boys and girls with disabilities, both in cities and rurally. And there is a program of sustainable families since November 2018. We're providing for a basic minimum pension for those with disabilities and who are dependent. We have also considered in our 2020 census registering those with disabilities. We are looking at equality of opportunity, to which we're fairly committed. We have here a COSP12 plan from our president, the human rights plan, including as priority groups those with disabilities, looking again through the focus of human rights. Thank you. I should like to thank the representative of El Salvador.
The representative of Algeria to make a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll read a statement, a summary, and the original version will be on PaperSmart. Mr. Chairman, the question of persons with disabilities and taking care of them, bringing them into society is part of the government's job, and we wish to meet all those challenges by adopting a number of policies and measures that will be helpful. Legal equality, non-discrimination among all citizens, including those with disabilities. In principle, this is a major plank for us. Our Constitution stipulates that all citizens are equal before the law, without discrimination against anyone based on race, gender, birth, opinion, or any other condition or circumstance which is personal or collective. Article 72 of the Constitution stipulates that the state is to make sure that fragile segments of the population have to have equal rights. So as part of this, a law was passed, 0902, for persons with disabilities. It was promulgated before ratification of the convention in 2009. Mr. Chairman, the Algerian legal arsenal has a number of rights for people who can prove that they have a disability based on solidarity. First of all, the right to education exists for all. The state makes sure that special needs kids have education. We do this by having teaching institutions that are especially dedicated to this. 238 institutions were established with a budget which is more than 10 billion dinars. Social integration and vocational integration for persons with disabilities. We have legislation 0912, which says that at least 1% of posts must be given to such persons who are laborers. Access. The constitutional article relevance here says that citizens have rights and obligations, especially with respect to eliminating obstacles which would stop people from thriving and participating in socioeconomic, political, and cultural life. In addition to participating in civil society, protection of persons with disabilities, and also in terms of receiving assistance. More than 1 billion dinars are earmarked for this. Algeria cooperates with international agencies to help persons with disabilities. The first preliminary report of our country on implementation of the convention was submitted the 29th of August 2018. A workshop was considered to review the Algerian legal texts. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria. I now invite the representative of Zambia to make a statement.
Chairperson, I have the honor to deliver Zambia's statement at its 12th session of the Conference of the State Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Zambia remains committed to the advancement of the rights of persons with disabilities and has put in place robust legislative framework such as the Zambia Disability Act No. 6 of 2012 in order to ensure the full implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The Act, among others, seeks to promote respect for inherent dignity, of persons with disabilities and ensures the equal enjoyment of the human rights and freedoms by persons with disabilities. Additionally, government has developed a national policy on disability which is premised on mainstreaming disability and addresses issues of poverty, unemployment, human rights, economic development, information and education, prevention and rehabilitation, accessibility, and HIV/AIDS, among others. Chairperson, Zambia, as a state party to the convention, has continued to make strides towards the promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities. Some of the notable ones include the conduct of a national disability survey in 2015, whose findings have indicated a 10.8% prevalence of disability for adults and 4.4% for children. We believe that these findings of the survey will serve as a resource for disability planning and programming. In addition, government has appointed focal point persons in all government ministries and institutions for the purposes of mainstreaming disability issues in all national development policies and programs. Let me take the opportunity to mention that government, with support from cooperating partners, is currently conducting training for focal point persons. Furthermore, the state party hosted the 60th community-based rehabilitation in Lusaka last year. The outcome of the conference included, among others, the call for governments to ensure the involvement of persons with disabilities. The state party has continued to include persons with disability in social protection programs, such as the cash transfer, and the impact is being seen, the positive impacts of the program. And as I conclude, Chairperson, I wish to reaffirm Zambia's commitment to the full implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Zambia. And now I ask for the next NGO statement. It will be Dementia Alliance International. The floor is yours.
Distinguished chairs, speakers and delegates, thank you for the opportunity to present this statement on behalf of Dementia Alliance International, a registered charity providing advocacy and support for people with dementia. Dementia is a major cause of disability. Dementia Alliance International started with a dream for full and equal inclusion and to be respected and valued as members of society. We advocate for equal access to universal health care. It's our dream now for the more than 50 million people living with dementia and the new diagnosis every 3 seconds. Being diagnosed myself with dementia, age 49, taught me what the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called that sense of otherness. I had not been stigmatised or discriminated against, except as a woman. I don't come from a deeply marginalised group. However, as one of the 50 million people currently living with dementia, whose life was thrown in the bin at the time of diagnosis, I am still experiencing daily stigmas and discrimination. Dementia is a significant global issue. It's the 7th cause of death globally, the 5th cause of death in America, and the 2nd cause of death in Australia. However, after a diagnosis of dementia, people do not receive universal health care. We do not receive rehabilitation or most other allied health services to support independence or social inclusion. We are segregated from others when requiring assisted living. We are institutionalised. We are restrained physically and chemically with no consideration for our rights. In society, clinical practice is usually only changed with strong evidence-based research. However, in the case of dementia, there are many examples where evidence-based research is not used. For example, the behavioural and psychological symptoms of dementia that was implemented many years ago, there was no evidence-based research. This has led to increasing chemical and physical restraint rather than improving care. The secure dementia units, also a breach of many rights, including our right to freedom, are now evolving into dementia villages, also with no evidence-based research for their value. Disease or disability-specific villages are little different to ghettoisation of groups of people. We are daily and systemically being denied our human rights. 5 years ago, Dr. Dennis Gillings, the dementia envoy for the World Dementia Council, said people with dementia may need to take to the streets and march on the steps of parliaments. This is the beginning of that march. We do not want to be left behind in the 2030 goals. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Dementia Alliance International. And now we move on with the list of speakers. And as the next speaker, I invite the representative of Qatar to make a statement.
The state of Qatar has guaranteed the protection of the persons with disability both in the constitution and law. The state has enacted national legislations to safeguard their legal rights, social solidarity, housing, work, social, psychological and health care, education, higher education, and their enjoyment of sports and culture. Social solidarity institutions, public or private, play an important role in caring and protecting persons with disability and providing them with different services so that they can enjoy their rights with independence and dignity and to ensure their effective participation in all walks of life. The state of Qatar has adopted and implemented a number of policies, including the housing policy and the 2030 Qatari vision and the first National Development Strategy, as well as the second National Development Strategy, 2018-2022. One of the most important projects was updating the different legislations, laws, and social programs for persons with disability. I would like to refer to the approval of the Qatari cabinet during its meeting held on the 15th of May 2019 of a draft law to establish the National Committee on Women, Children, Elderly, and Persons with Disability, presided over by Her Excellency, the Minister of Administrative Development, Labour and Social Affairs. The ministry plays an important role and develop and implement different programs and provide services for the rehabilitation of persons with disability. It raises the awareness of society with their rights, training service providers, updating databases, and providing information that all contribute in implementing the different plans and strategies targeting them. The Ministry of Administrative Development, Labour and Social Affairs conducts a wide range of activities that aim at the rehabilitation of persons with disabilities. Around 100 persons with disability were employed in the government. The state of Qatar is one of the very first countries in the region that has invested heavily in modern technology in general and assistive technology in particular, proceeding from our belief in the importance of providing the best services and technical solutions for persons with disability. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Qatar. I now invite the representative of Vietnam to make a statement.
Mr. President, we ally ourselves with the statement to be delivered by the distinguished representative of Malaysia on behalf of ASEAN, and I would like to make the following remarks on our national capacity. Since our ratification of the CRPD in 2015, we have been making continuous efforts for the full and effective implementation of the Convention. In January 2019, we launched the first ever national survey on persons with disabilities. This is the first time Vietnam conducted such a large-scale survey using the measuring tools based on the international standards on disability. Its findings on disability status of the population and the socio-economic conditions of persons with disabilities will better inform planning and policies for addressing barriers facing them, promoting their participation in their communities and wider society, and improving their lives. Vietnam therefore highly appreciates this year's meaningful theme of ensuring inclusion of persons with disabilities in a changing world through the implementation of the CRPD. To this end, we believe that awareness raising needs to be our first and foremost priority, not only because it is our obligation as a state party to the CRPD, but also because it will benefit the society as a whole. Positive changes in the perception of disability issues serve as a starting point in the path towards a truly inclusive society. Vietnam has undertaken diverse activities to promote public awareness on disability policies, the rights of persons with disabilities, as well as their participation and contributions. These activities target government officials through training courses, workshops, and conferences, reach out to persons with disabilities, their family members, and the public through various television and radio programs, newspapers, and other publications. April 18 has been proclaimed as the Vietnam Disability Day, and on such occasions, performances, exhibitions, and National Paralympic Games are regularly organized for persons with disabilities. To conclude, Mr. President, we reaffirm our commitments to further strengthening the implementation of the CRPD at national, regional, and global levels as an integral part of our efforts to deliver on the promise of leaving no one behind. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Vietnam, and I now invite the representative of Belgium to make a statement.
Monsieur
Chairman, members of the Bureau, delegates, 10 years ago, Belgium ratified the UN CRPD. So for 10 years now, the government has committed itself to implementing this document. During this period of time, a number of strategies and actions have been conducted at different levels of administration to give substance to these commitments. So in this context, Belgium has begun to prepare its second and third reports on implementation of the convention that we will submit in April 2020 to the Committee of Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The consolidated report and constructive dialogue with the committee, which will come later, will be an opportunity to present progress made and challenges still to be taken up in our country. It is a vital exercise, and Belgium fully supports the role of the committee in this work. The path to follow up on including persons with disabilities in society is still long. Belgium is mindful of the challenges we still need to take up, but certain milestones significant ones have been set down. Here are 4 specific examples. In terms of social integration, we have been modernizing integration for persons with disabilities. A research group has been put together for different universities in order to come up with a different assessment tool to decide what are the needs of persons with disabilities. This new developed tool, will differ from the medical model and will give more weight to participating in society. Measures have been taken the last few years to combat sexual violence against women by emphasizing prevention, protection of the victims, and prosecuting violent perpetrators. To strengthen the rights of women with disabilities against whom violence has been perpetrated, we paid attention to training and educating stakeholders in the areas of social assistance and education. 3, regarding inclusion of persons with disabilities in culture, sport, and leisure, a number of initiatives have been conducted. For example, access to tourism infrastructure has been strengthened through charters and certification systems. Belgium has also participated in the European Disability Card project, a card which gives access to culture, sport, and leisure activities for persons with disabilities. And finally, the annual Salon in a Life of Love emphasizes the importance of relations and sexual activity for persons with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Je remercie le représentant de la Belgique.
Thank the representative of Belgium.
Representative of Sri Lanka to make a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sri Lanka welcomes this year's session under the theme ensuring inclusion of persons with disabilities in a changing world through the implementation of the CRPD. Rapid technological advancement over the recent decades certainly brings great opportunities for persons with disabilities, but also includes its own set of challenges. While information and communication technologies and assistive technology play a critical role in enabling and empowering persons with disabilities, special care must be taken to ensure that these technologies are effectively harnessed and that no one is left behind. Sri Lanka continues to recognize the importance of prioritizing those with disabilities, allowing for their access to resources and services. The foundation for inclusiveness is enshrined within our Constitution, which inter alia allows for special provision to be made for the advancement of disabled persons. Specific laws have been enacted accordingly to make such provision. The country's long-standing welfare policies and programs further contribute to ensuring that no one is left behind. Sri Lanka's National Human Rights Action Plan contains Sri Lanka's vision for implementing human rights from 2017 to 2021 and gives special focus to those with disabilities. Sri Lanka also acknowledges with appreciation this year's cross-cutting theme of awareness raising, which continues to be a priority in the country, with the National Human Rights Action Plan recognizing the goals of increasing disability, increased disability sensitization and awareness among the public sector and increasing visibility for disability in and through the media. We realize there are a number of gaps and challenges remain, and the Government of Sri Lanka is making every effort to address these issues. The Government of Sri Lanka has pledged to improve education access for differently abled through more targeted education programs. This is an area where technology and IT can be used to better serve students with disabilities. Mr. Chairman, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development sets out an ambitious global vision to reach and empower those who are left behind, including persons with disabilities. Sri Lanka stands fully committed to this goal and to the full implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the representative of Sri Lanka, and I now invite the representative of Morocco to make a statement.
Mr. Chairman, the question of persons with disabilities is a priority for us starting in 2011. Since then, we have been doing work to deal with all forms of discrimination because of disability. We ensure that we provide rights to persons with disabilities by adopting programs for their integration into society so that they will enjoy the rights of all citizens. We are committed to promoting the rights of persons with disabilities through the signing of the convention, in addition to the protocol, the additional protocol, which harmonizes us with our national constitution. We have promulgated and published Law 9313, which takes into consideration the conditions required by UNCRPD, and we've adopted a national policy for persons with disabilities in order to make sure that they can participate in society. Moreover, there is a national plan, a national work plan for vocational integration. In this regard, we have organized or launched a national program in order to promote vocational training, especially for autistic persons. We have adopted social cohesion programs in order to promote participation in schools, vocational schools, and a large number of institutions. We have a national program as well, which has been adopted in a number of projects to deal with disabilities and to promote sign language. All of these programs, all of these efforts have been possible due to very clear policies coming from His Majesty, our King, in order to promote the commitment of our kingdom towards persons with disabilities so that we can protect them through the UNCPRD as part of the SDGs. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Morocco, and now I invite the representative from Disability Federation of Ireland to make a statement from the designated seat for NGO speakers.
Good morning, Mr. President. I'm pleased to participate in this general debate of the 12th COSP. Mr. President, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights did not deliver for people with disabilities. 6 decades on, the UN had to invent a toolkit, an implementation toolkit called the CRPD, and that was following strong and consistent advocacy from the international disability movement, IDA and others. The implementation clock that should have started in 1948 did not start until after 2006. We must remember and reflect and act on this. For many states, we as people with disabilities are not an urgent enough priority, and our states are ineffective in how they go about making the changes that are needed. My experience tells me that the way our government and public service bodies are structured is holding back progress. Our ministries and public bodies are not designed or practiced enough to operate horizontally to maximise person-centred outcomes in spite of their best intentions. Many states need to recognise and confront this barrier, and the United Nations itself needs to also put effort into helping to resolve this, what I call, efficiency issue. Results for people with disabilities are modest compared to the efforts that are often put in. Ireland is serious about implementation and wants to make progress. Our disability movement will positively support and keep the pressure on as a critical friend and work with government. Indeed, in recent times, through our Oireachtas Disability Group, our group of disability movement and parliamentarians, we are addressing this issue. I make 4 particular examples. Our Minister for Disability, Finian McGrath, who made a statement here yesterday, is involved at cabinet level and participates there. Active consideration of disability inclusion measures through equality proofing measures in our annual budgets to include disability. Collective meetings starting this year with all the Secretary Generals across our government departments, and meetings set up with the chairperson of our parliamentary oversight committees for each department is also planned. To conclude, these are significant steps to ensure that we maximise progress. Government with the disability movement understands that there is much still to be delivered for Irish citizens with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we shall restart with this unfinished agenda item general debate to hear the remainder of the speakers, starting with Moldova this afternoon at 3 p.m. We now proceed to the next agenda item, the Roundtable 1 panel discussion. Thank you very much.
And we have also a video connection, so it takes a few minutes.
I kindly ask the panelists to join the podium as well as the co-chair. Thank you.
James, you're here. How are you doing? Busy? Thank you. I think we need to move the chair.
The secretariat
some
seating.
Technical issue here. Just a moment. I think this is the way, only way. Chair, sorry.
This is for.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
And this for Mr. Hossain.
It's for you. That's fine for me. Chair, you want to stay here? Okay, you just here.
No, it's quite okay. This is co-chair. Okay. If we really need it. Actually, in Finnish language, we have a saying that if somebody's really dummy, hard-headed, he's yellow. So, you want to have some water?
We don't. You just speak and we will click. Yeah. You will speak. Now. Well, we have to. When do you go down?
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you all to this first thematic roundtable and co-chair the discussion along with my civil society colleague Mr. Mosharraf Hossain, who is the Director in charge of Global Policy and Planning Department from Action on Disability and Development International. Together we will facilitate this roundtable entitled Technology, Digitalization and International Communication Technologies, ICTs, for the empowerment and inclusion of persons with disabilities. The world is changing rapidly, and at the heart of this change is the ongoing digital revolution that is fundamentally changing the way we live, work and relate to one another. This transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before. New technologies provide great potential for the implementation of the CRPD and to the world's efforts regarding the achievement of Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals, which highlights science, technology and innovation as important means of implementing them. While technological solutions provide us new ways to promote human rights and the rights of persons with disabilities, they also raise several human rights-related challenges, particularly related to new frontier technologies such as artificial intelligence, AI. It is important to recognize that the digital technology and connectivity entails risks of harm, both online and offline, including loss of privacy. Further, artificial intelligence and machine learning may cause discrimination and enhance gender and other biases if we are not careful. This can be intentional or unintentional. Thus, we have to think of the structures and processes that are required to be put into place to ensure that diverse voices are heard when new technologies are being developed. It is crucial that persons with disabilities have access to technological solutions and its benefits through education that is suited for the needs of persons with disabilities. It is necessary to ensure that the new technological solutions are designed to and with persons with disabilities. Without equal and affordable access to technologies and information, persons with disabilities experience discrimination in an increasing manner. It is also important to discuss how to raise awareness on the benefits of technology in the inclusion and empowerment of persons with disabilities, as well as in the promotion of the role of persons with disabilities as producers and users of technology. With these words, I would like to open this important panel on my part. And now I would like to give the floor to my co-chair, Mr. Hossain, please.
Thank you, Mr. Pekka Pustinen. Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, and colleagues of disability movement from the north to south, east to west. It is an honor for me to join the Conference of State Party again, this time as a co-chair for this roundtable on digitization, inclusion, and realization of rights of persons with disabilities. We are living in an age of fourth industrial revolution, when the information and communication technology change our lives and transform the society. There are multifaceted of technology. Assistive technology help us to overcome our challenges related to impairment. And digital technology is for all, where we should have equal access. Let me share my story. In my childhood, a pair of crutches, which is called intermediate technology, enabled me to go to school. Today, an electronic wheelchair and assistive technology speed up my mobility. Information and communication technology enable me to accomplish my professional work. Of course, there are other things, but assistive devices played an important role in changing my life, in the lives of persons with disabilities in this room and around the world. Access to assistive technology is the fundamental rights of all persons with disabilities. The CRPD calls on all member states to ensure assistive technology for all their citizens with a disability. It is an obligation of our governments to ensure assistive technology to all of us. Why? Question is why? The answer is technology enables us to have education, health services, employment, and to participate in public and political life. Technology empowers us. Technology enables us to live independently. Other facet of technology is to transform the society for disability inclusion. ICT has enormous power to create awareness to change the stigma and discriminations. We can use ICT to mobilize persons with disability against discriminations and promote human rights. Technology must be accessible, affordable, available, and for all. To address the digital divide in low and middle-income countries, I often try to answer three questions. How we can use the indigenous technology which are available in the community and in our countries. How we can upgrade the intermediate technologies, and how we can transfer technology that worked in one place to another place. But the most important thing is the participation of person with disability, not only as a customer, but as a producer, engineer, and entrepreneur to unlock the potential of technology from the lived experience of disability and niche market for 1 billion people with a disability in the world. The capacity building of young persons with disabilities in digital technology is crucial to address technological gap and digital divide. Article 32 of CRPD says international cooperation has significant role. The DFID Disability Inclusion Strategy identified access to assistive technology as a cross-cutting issue and committed to reach over 500 million persons with disabilities, providing essential assistive technology by 2030. Yesterday, a participant in a side event asked what United Nations can do. The answer is give leadership, bring multi-stakeholders, mobilize the commitment. We will listen more from our four speakers who have a lot of experience and ideas. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. And now I would like to acknowledge the distinguished panelists we have present at the podium. And actually, we have a division of labor here. Maybe, Mr. Co-Chair, you will start.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pustinen. I would like to acknowledge our distinguished panelists who are present here, but one of them, Ms. Tuiti Mätsinen, she is a disability inclusion advisor from Finland. Unfortunately, Ms. Mätsinen could not travel to in New York, but she kindly agreed to join us in this panel discussion via video conference. Let's extend a special salute to Ms. Mätsinen. Now I think it is your turn.
And then I would like to introduce to the right Mrs. Immaculada Placencia, Senior Expert and Disability Focal Point in the European Commission, European Union. To my left, Mr. James Thurston, Vice President of the Global Initiative for Inclusive Information and Communication Technologies, G3 ICT for short, from the USA.
The fourth panelist is Nirmita. Sorry. The fourth panelist is Ms. Nirmita Narasimhan. She is from India, and she is a Senior Fellow and Program Director of G3 ICT India.
Ladies and gentlemen, in order to have a focused and interactive discussion, I would kindly invite each of our panelists to make an initial presentation for maximum 7 minutes. After presentations, we will invite the delegations to join a follow-up interactive discussion with panel members who will respond to questions and comments from the floor. In that segment of about 1 hour, there will be opportunities for delegations and other observers to either pose their specific questions to panelists or to make brief comments that must be relevant to the current discussion in the roundtable. Delegations can make such requests by pressing your button after the chair opens the floor when all panelists finish their presentations. And accredited NGOs and other participants shall submit their requests in writing via email to address enable@un.org. Copying to Shang-Chi is CHANGG@un.org. And when they are invited by the co-chair, they shall take the designated NGO seat and speak from that seat with the nameplate for NGO speaker in the venue. Requests must provide their full name, the title of the organization he or she is representing, and their direct contact email addresses. Please note all interventions shall be strictly limited to no longer than 3, preferably 2 minutes, with no exception. Now let me return to my distinguished panelists. Please note that when making your oral presentations and engaging in the interactive discussion, panelists are invited to kindly address on 1 or 2 of the following questions as proposed in the background paper for the roundtable, namely, A, what are the barriers that may negatively affect access by persons with disabilities to technology, digitalization and ICT? What good examples are there of initiatives to promote this access? B, what can be done by governments, UN agencies and private actors to promote access by persons with disabilities to technology, digitalization and ICT, and how can they work together to this end? C, what measures do states parties need to take to increase the availability and use of assistive technology for those who need it? What initiatives have been taken to address the unmet need for assistive technology? D, are there specific measures that have encouraged the producers of technology, both in the public and private sectors, to create products sensitive to the needs of persons with disabilities, including universal design? E, what examples of good practices are there to raise awareness among the governments and decision makers, ICT industries, educators and employers of the benefits of technology for the inclusion and empowerment of persons with disabilities? And finally, F, how to raise awareness and promote the active and leader role of persons with disabilities as producers and users of technology. Now, actually, I give it to my co-chair to introduce our first panelist.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Marcinen, and ladies, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Now it is my honor to introduce our first panelist, our first speaker, Ms. Toiti Marcinen, Disability Inclusion Advisor, who is joining us via video conference today from Finland. Ms. Marcinen is a disability inclusive advisor, I told before. Her work is focused on promoting accessible social structures that enable the full participation of people with disabilities. And her work and interests include inclusivity and ethics of new digital futures, and ensure that new digital services are designed using an inclusive approach. Ms. Marcinen, you have the floor. Please try to make your presentation within 7 minutes.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, digitalization and technological development shape the world and the future we live in. In this speech, I'm going to focus on digitalization and new technologies from 3 perspectives. First, access to technology, then access to digital services, And finally, collection and governance of data. Throughout my speech, I will use smartphones and mobile money as examples of the above. Persons with disabilities access to technological devices has improved as product designers have incorporated a growing selection of inbuilt accessibility features to their devices. The global trend of businesses gaining their profit from services rather than devices has lowered sales prices, making it more feasible for persons with disabilities to purchase a mobile device. Regular functions that are based on audio, video, and text also facilitate the usability of technology for persons with a wide range of disabilities. A good example of such a device is a smartphone, a product that was not originally designed to be an assistive device, but yet serves as one for many people around the world. Smartphones provide access to information, access to communication, and access to services such as online banking, mobile money, and GPS-based maps and navigating. All these help eliminate physical and communicational barriers that persons with disabilities face. However, persons with disabilities are typically among the poorest of the poor in their communities. For many people, even standard devices, let alone more expensive ICTs, or assistive devices are beyond their financial means and therefore not available for them. Persons with disabilities who are employed or come from wealthy backgrounds are better off to address their individual technological needs. The financial barrier to accessing technology reflects the intersectional nature and identities of persons with disabilities. Women and girls with disabilities or persons with disabilities who belong to a marginalized minority have fewer opportunities to attend elementary, vocational, and higher education. This leads to lower rates of employment and reduced access to technology. In some national contexts, this inequality is further exacerbated by social security plans that provide assistive devices primarily to meet study or work-related needs. People outside of the formal job market are left marginalized. This is especially alarming given the increase in informal and non-traditional jobs. Access to digital services provides persons with disabilities with a wide range of services that can improve the standard of living and empower them. One such service that has grown rapidly is mobile money. Mobile money that is not connected to existing banks is present in many parts of the world. The operational environments of mobile money services vary from East Africa, where one service provider holds up to 80% of the market share, to more volatile societies where there are a high number of parallel mobile and cash currencies in use. Mobile money has been applauded for providing access to financial services for many people who have formerly been unbanked. For persons with disabilities, mobile money eradicates physical barriers of getting to a bank or an ATM. Of course, this only applies to those people with disabilities who have access to a mobile device. A large number of persons with disabilities face severe difficulties either accessing mobile devices or using the services on them. Blind and partially sighted people have to rely on the help of another person to handle mobile money, which makes them vulnerable to fraud. In contexts where multiple mobile and cash currencies are used parallelly, people need to distinguish the different currencies and exchange rates and be conversant to negotiate prices and currencies with the other party of the transaction. This creates institutional and communicational barriers, especially for people with intellectual disabilities and for deaf persons. Low level of education and lack of basic numeracy and literacy skills create similar barriers for many more people with disabilities. There is also good development. The largest service provider in East Africa has recognized these challenges and started developing solutions such as interactive voice response or braille-based solutions together with organizations of persons with disabilities. So far, these accommodations cover only part of the functions of the mobile currency and are limited by the low level of braille literacy. For mobile money providers to invest in accessibility, there needs to be long-term stability in the operational environment. With the development of machine learning and artificial intelligence, data has become a global resource for service design, both for businesses and for governments. Therefore, it is crucial that disability disaggregated data on persons with disabilities and their needs is systematically collected and included in the datasets used for research and development purposes, whether public or private. Gender bias in big data is a widely recognized phenomenon that can be observed by anyone by a simple Google search. Searching for images on boys on bikes brings results of young boys riding bicycles, whereas girls on bikes portrays a selection of adult women in their underwear posing with bicycles. The existing gender bias in datasets used by search engines results in this. Similar bias exists also in persons with disabilities, but unlike the gender bias, this phenomenon is not well known. In order to address this, we need to find out what kind of data exists and what kind of data would be needed in order to present persons with disabilities and their needs in a representative manner for future technological development. Digitalization is and will be a trend that empowers persons with disabilities. Inclusive digitalization will also provide countries with a large number of skilled workforce that contributes towards financial development and provides growing customer base for private businesses. However, reaching these goals requires action. Therefore, I would like to recommend the following. First, United Nations, governments and the private sector should cooperate with organizations of persons with disabilities in order to identify technological needs and solutions. Second, the United Nations member states should guarantee a high level of international and national standards on e-accessibility. Third, governments should collect disability disaggregated data systematically, utilizing tools such as the Washington Group questions that are designed for this purpose. Fourth, private actors and governments should analyze existing data and identify gaps and existing bias. And finally, private sector should take interoperability, universal design, and inbuilt accessibility features as a starting point to their product design and development. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Ms. Matsinen. In Bangladesh, from where I came, the Grameenphone empower marginalized women to have access to the market. In China, disabled person, and I forgot his name, doing a small business using mobile phone. In 25 years ago, when I went to the community, it was very difficult to reach the people in the rural areas to give message, but now through mobile, we can reach anytime, even from here. So how mobile technology has empowered disabled people, women, even other marginalized people. So thank you very much for your excellent presentation. I would like to request you to stay online as much as you can in order to follow the proceedings and also join us in the interactions with delegations as soon after the presentation by all panelists. Thank you.
Yeah. And now we will hear from our next panelist, Mrs. Inmaculada Placencia, who works as senior expert and disability focal point in the European Commission of the European Union. The unit she works in coordinates policies for persons with disabilities, including the European Disability Strategy 2010-2020 and the implementation of the United Nations CRPD. She joined the European Commission in 1991, working since then in research, policy and legislation on assistive technology and accessibility in the EU and internationally. She is the expert responsible for the development of specific accessibility legislation, including in ICT, adopted in 2019, and for the EU standardization on accessibility, including on ICT. Mrs. Placencia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can I get the slides, please? Thank you. Well, with this presentation, I would like to provide an overview of what EU policies and legislation on mainstream ICT accessibility has done in order to improve access by persons with disabilities to ICT on equal basis with others. In addition, with the presentation, I share a number of measures that motivate and incentivize economic operators to develop accessible ICT products and services. While ICT is omnipresent in all areas of our lives, accessibility is not catching up with the same speed of development and penetration of ICT. It is essential to shift towards setting up ecosystems that maximizes opportunities for ensuring ICT accessibility in order to achieve that equal access for persons with disabilities. A first key element is to embrace a definition or concepts of accessibility that contains as much as possible concrete accessibility requirements. They should set the characteristics of the products, services, and infrastructures. Defining ICT accessible implies adopting requirements of what ICT should provide in terms of choice, personalization, options, and features and functions so that persons with disabilities can access ICT in an effective manner. These definitions, of course, must be based on user needs. An effective ecosystem should, on one hand, put obligations on those responsible for the products, services, and infrastructures to make them accessible. And on the other hand, it should incentivize and reward those compliant with accessibility. For the ecosystem to function, those measures should include strong enforcement provisions that are effective in remedy breach of accessibility. Can I have the next slide, please? The EU has adopted a number of complementary laws that address ICT accessibility from various perspectives and provide a very complete ecosystem. First, accessibility legislation that contains direct obligations for economic operators to place in the EU market only accessible ICT mainstream products and services. Second, accessibility legislation that contains obligations for public authorities to provide ICT accessibility on their own services. Third, legislation that requires public authorities to buy, inter alia, ICT accessibility. Fourth, legislation that regulating the use of key EU funds that require observing accessibility when those funds are spent. In the next slide, I provide some examples of those products and services concerned by that legislation. We're talking here about accessible computers and operating systems, self-service terminals such as ATM, ticketing machines, check-in machines, payment terminals. We're talking about telephones and smartphones, TV equipment related to digital television services, telephony services, broadcast services and its content, as well as access to those services. Certain elements such as websites, online information, real-time information, and smart ticketing of air, bus, rail, and waterborne passenger transport services. We are also having legislation addressing consumer banking services, e-books, e-commerce, and online services, websites and mobile apps, and emergency communications. While legislation is essential, it is not sufficient. Legal measures need to be accompanied by other ICT accessibility policies. Some examples of EU measures include, if I can have slide 5, accessibility standards that provide in a voluntary manner more details about possible ways to implement accessibility requirements in law. A number of mandates for developing these standards are issued at EU level. Work carried out under mandates 376, 473, and 420 produced standards on ICT accessibility, on how to apply on this design for all to achieve accessible products and services, and on accessibility to the built environment, on the built environment where the ICT is placed. Among the key successful measures to promote and reward accessibility, the EU counts with the Access City Award competition. A special mention has been available for accessible smart cities. An additional incentive enshrined in the EU funds rules is the possibility to get funds to remove existing accessibility barriers. In the next slide, while a lot is being done to provide ICT, a word of caution is needed. The key word is prevention. Today, accessibility is relatively common in areas such as the web or telephony, but it remains a rare phenomenon in new ICT areas. Some of them are artificial intelligence applications, robotics, services based on the Internet of Things, future generations of mobile networks, smart cities, and many others that are today in the research labs. There is where we need to have the future generations of accessible technologies. In addition, it is clear that given the evolution of technology and its participatory nature and the increasing shared ownership of ICT resources, accessibility is not a one-off issue. It requires joint and continuous efforts for its maintenance. Furthermore, in addition to ICT professionals, the use and the applications of ICT, as well as ICT-related content, is under development and is enriched by contributions of many authors, not only ICT professionals. The sustainability of ICT accessibility is more and more depending on successful training programs for ICT professionals, but also for content creators. To finish, in the European Union, we are now finishing a cycle. The current European Disability Strategy is coming to an end in 2020, and this presentation reflects some of its achievements. In the future, sustained investment and additional efforts are needed to ensure the implementation of a well-functioning ICT accessibility ecosystem. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Immaculada Placencia. We will now hear from our third panelist, Mr. James Thurston, Vice President of the Global Initiative for Inclusive Information and Communication Technologies, G3 ICT USA. Mr. James Thurston is Vice President for Global Strategy and Development of the Global Initiative for Inclusive ICTs. He has an expertise in use of ICTs to promote the inclusion and human rights of people with disabilities around the world. Prior to joining G3 ICT, Mr. Thurston was Director of International Accessibility Policy at Microsoft, where he developed and executed a worldwide strategy to expand the company's outreach on disability and technology issues to governments and NGOs around the world. He has also served as a standards leader for an international technology industry association, an economic and technology advisor to a US senator and vice presidential candidate, and a senior manager for a national technology and economic development initiative of the US government. Mr. Thurston, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you so much to both of our co-chairs and to the other panelists. I want to speak just briefly this morning a little bit about the enormous and amazing digital transformation that we're experiencing around the world and what that means for inclusion and rights of persons with disabilities around the world. Just briefly, by way of introduction to G3 ICT, we are an international NGO that was created in 2006 at the time that the CRPD was coming into force and adopted by the UN. And at the time, we appreciated and continue to appreciate the support and partnership of UNDESA. Our mission at G3 ICT is to promote the accessibility of ICTs, of information and communication technologies, as required by the CRPD. Our approach to this work is through multi-stakeholder programs and collaborations with civil society, with government, and with industry. Among other things, we work with governments around the world to create and implement ICT accessibility and digital inclusion policies and programs to support the technology aspects of the CRPD. G3ICT manages the International ICT Accessibility Professional Society, IAAP, and we hold an annual conference called M-Enabling that will actually be next week in Washington, D.C., not far from here, that annually brings together more than 700 leaders and professionals from around the world to look at these issues of accessibility, technology, and inclusion. We also lead the Smart Cities for All global initiative that is working to make sure that cities today that are using technology, and really every city is using technology today to some extent, but to make sure that as they're using these technologies in cities, that they're doing so in a way that is inclusive of everyone, including persons with disabilities. We absolutely believe that technology can and must support the empowerment and inclusion of persons with disabilities, but we see in our research, our analysis, and our daily work that the deployment of technology assets can also make the digital divide for persons with disabilities worse, not better. At G3ICT, we're committed to the development and the deployment, the use of public policies, programs, and tools to help ensure that the global digital transformation that we are all experiencing every day can also lead to greater inclusion and support the rights within the CRPD. Let me explain a little bit more. As we all know, there is today a digital transformation happening in all sectors of society. We're all using technology in more and more ways and throughout our day, from the moment we wake up until the moment we go to sleep, and really even using technology after we've gone to sleep and we're sleeping. There are more than 8 billion mobile telephone subscriptions in the world. That's more than there are people in the world today. There are more than 50 billion IoT devices that are connected to the internet, not just PCs and mobile phones, but it's our cars, our bikes, scooters, refrigerators, our watches. Everything is increasingly connected. Looking forward, and I think very importantly, 70% of the youth today are online. That's worldwide, global north and global south. We truly have today a global generation of digital natives, and that has huge implications for how we're designing and deploying technology. We see this digital transformation happening in key sectors that are core to the CRPD and that are a focus of our work at G3ICT. We see a digital transformation, the increased use of technology happening in education and in classrooms, in courts and in justice systems, in elections and political processes, in cities worldwide where most people live and that provide so many critical services to all of us, like transportation, public safety, healthcare, and emergency preparedness and response. All of these sectors are increasingly deploying technology in classrooms, in courts, in voting booths, on public transportation, and in e-government services. For example, we know that the global market for technology in cities, that's technology that's purchased by and used by cities across all of the services they provide and that we all use, that global market for technology in cities will reach more than $2.5 trillion US dollars in the next few years. It's an enormous investment in technology by cities that's really redefining how we as people engage with each other, with our communities, and with our cities. We're also seeing a similar digital transformation, a similar investment in and deployment of technology in courts. According to a study by the American Bar Association, 55% of trial lawyers in the US are using technology today in courtrooms, including 33% to access evidence in really important key documents to cases. We're seeing similar movement to technology in courts in Brazil, the UK, Argentina, the UAE, and more countries. We also see this kind of digital transformation, this rapid and broad deployment of technology in the education sector by employers and workplaces and transportation. And while this digital transformation is exciting and supporting important goals like ease of use and personalization of services, efficiencies and cost controls, we have to ask, is it really working for everyone today, this broad investment in technology and deployment of technology? And I think many of us know the answer to that it's not today. Each year, G3ICT does a global survey and analysis of how well countries around the world are doing at implementing the technology aspects of the CRPD. From that analysis called the DARE Index, we know that just 40% of countries around the world have government websites that are accessible. You'll hear more about this unique data set shortly from my colleague to my left. From the work of our Smart Cities for All global initiative, we know that cities today, smart cities using technology, are actually making the digital divide worse, not better. In the early stages of this project, we surveyed more than 250 experts worldwide, and they told us that smart cities are not using ICT accessibility standards, and they are failing people with disabilities. That could mean things like a smart cities app for transportation planning that's not providing maps and graphical images with alt text, or it could be that the city's digital payment systems time out too fast for people with cognitive disabilities. We see similar issues in justice systems worldwide. Last year, we partnered with the International Disability Alliance, IDA, to survey its members about access to justice and the use of technology in courts. Maybe some of you actually participated in that survey. From that survey, we learned that 85% of IDA's members that responded to the survey said that today persons with disabilities do not have equal access to justice. And the majority of the respondents said that the courts in their countries do not use technology to assist persons with disabilities. In fact, today, in many ways, technology is a barrier to justice for many people with disabilities. For example, critical information related to cases or court proceedings may not be available in accessible formats, and justice system personnel are often not trained in accessible technology, disability, and accommodation. But we know that the growing deployment of technology assets into every aspect of our lives does not have to make the digital divide worse. In fact, when digital transformations of schools and courts and cities are done well, they absolutely can help close the digital divide. For example, there are global standards that define what accessibility means for every kind of technology and every kind of disability, but governments still too often are not aware of and using those standards. There are also great policy approaches that governments can adopt, like procurement policies similar to Section 508 in the US, in the European Procurement Directive in the EU that governments can adopt to require that they only buy accessible technology. I'd like to congratulate our colleague here on this panel, Ima Plasencia, for her leadership over many years in Europe to make accessibility standards and procurement a tool for inclusion and rights across the EU. These procurement policies and standards are so important because governments are enormous consumers of technology. In the US government, at all levels, national government, state and city governments buy more than 40% of all the technology sold in the US. So if governments, including all of your governments, say that they will only buy accessible technology, it has an enormous impact on the market, on the development of increasingly accessible and innovative technologies. We've seen more and more countries around the world looking to ICT accessibility standards and procurement policies as a means to promote inclusion and human rights. Australia has adopted similar policies. Most recently, Canada is in the process of adopting a procurement policy and ICT accessibility standards. Let me finish by saying that the good news is that there are steps that industry, civil society, and governments can take to make sure that technology deployments, that the exciting global digital transformation that we are seeing and experiencing really does work for everyone. At G3ICT and Smart Cities for All, we have created a range of tools to help national governments, cities, courts, schools, employers, and others make sure that the technology solutions they are buying and deploying really do work for everyone, including persons with disabilities. Many of our tools are available in multiple languages, and I would encourage you to look at g3ict.org and smartcitiesforall.org for guidance and tools to bring together government, industry, and civil society to make sure that technology is working to eliminate the digital divide, and also that we are applying technology in innovative and creative ways to solve long-standing inclusion and accessibility challenges. Thank you for your attention and for the work that you're doing every day in your countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Mr. Thurston.
Okay.
Over to you.
I think technology scenario, availability and accessibility in the global north and global south is completely different. But many countries like India, Bangladesh are doing well, and they are not left behind. So I would like to now listen the experience from India. So I'm requesting our fourth panelist today. Her name is Ms. Nirmita Narasimhan. She is founding member of the Center for Internet and Society. Narsimhan is a Senior Fellow and Program Director of Global Initiative for Inclusive ICTs, based in Bengaluru, in India. She has over a decade of experience of working on accessibility for persons with disabilities. She has served on several Indian government committees and provided input to drafting ICT accessibility policies in many countries. Her work on ICT accessibility has touched upon education, employment, copyright, procurement, smart cities, and telecom. She is an internationally recognized expert, having participated in the negotiation process for the Marrakesh Treaty at WIPO, worked on several reports with ITU and UNESCO. She has received multiple awards recognizing her contribution, including National Award from the President of India. Ms. Narsimhan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I would be really happy to share experiences from India, perhaps in the interactive discussion. I will be focusing my intervention on guiding question number 1, which is relating to identifying the gaps which act as barriers for persons with disabilities to accessing ICTs. And for that purpose, I would like to refer to the DARE Index, or the Digital Accessibility Rights Evaluation Index, which is a joint collaboration of G3 ICT and DPI. This is a framework to benchmark states parties' progress on how they are implementing the ICT accessibility, ICT dispositions of the CRPD. This is an annual survey, and in 2018 we had about 121 respondent countries, which is about 89% of the global population. And the experts who respond to this are persons with disabilities, advocates, researchers, and the community itself. It's based on human rights monitoring framework, and many of the countries, many of the questions in the survey are based on the ITU G3 ICT model policy report. The DARE Index tries to evaluates countries' progress under 3 broad heads. The first is country commitments, whether countries have ratified the CRPD, they have anti-discrimination law, etc. So the global average for this is at 65%. And we find 2 areas of concern where countries are scoring less. 49% of countries only have a definition of ICT accessibility in their laws. And only 35% of countries have included persons with disabilities in the universal service obligation. Now, the universal service obligation is clearly an excellent resource for countries to be able to fund projects relating to ICTs. So here is a huge opportunity which is presently being overlooked by countries. Moving on to the second aspect, which is evaluated, is what is the country's capacity to implement digital accessibility? And here there are 3 areas which we find countries score really less. One is that only 23% of countries have a mechanism in place to involve persons with disabilities in policy making. So nothing about us without us is not really happening in ICT accessibility, and that is acting as a huge barrier. The other things, a couple of things which we see is that only 40% of countries are participating in meetings in standard development organizations, and only about 37% of countries have courses on accessibility or universal design in major universities. So capacity building is getting overlooked, and unless you have the requisite capacity, you're not able to implement policies if you have them. So the global average for country capacity is at 57%, and you'll find that is much lower than country commitments. Moving on to the third aspect, which is looked at by the survey, is actual implementation and outcomes. And the situation here is even more grim. We find that 60% of countries do not have any policies relating to ICT accessibility at all. And only 40% have. And out of these, 38.1% of countries say they're at minimum level of implementation. 2.6% of countries have partial or substantial implementation. And 2.5% of the countries say that they have policies, but there is no implementation. So given this percentage, we see that most of the times, if countries have policies, they actually take steps to implement them. The survey, the index looks at 10 key technology areas, which were identified in the DPI, IDA, G3 ICT Descent Call for Action at the UN in 2016. And you can see that the percentages here of implementation are pretty less. At the top of the list is television with 48%, websites 45%, assistive technology in education is 44%, e-books is 40%, assistive technology for employment is 39%, smart cities and e-governance is 35%, assistive technology for independent living is 34%, promotion of the internet is 33%, mobile is 32%, and procurement is 31%. So it's all within the range of 48 to 31, and we find that some of the really key technologies like mobile, even for that, the implementation is at 32%. So globally, we find that countries, for implementation, the score is 40%, with countries having a better level of economic development, perhaps performing better, and countries of Europe and North America have a better score as compared to other regions, and the Middle East as compared to other regions. So the key takeaway from looking at this survey, the index, is that policies are really important. If you have policies, that's the first step to catalyzing engagement of multiple stakeholders to promoting ICTs. It's important to have capacity building. Enough attention needs to be paid to capacity building and standards. And of course, involving persons with disabilities. Where you have success stories is where you have involved persons with disabilities who are the key stakeholders. So solutions are there and these need to be adopted. Otherwise, we continue to be deprived of using technology and participating in everyday life. I'd like to conclude with a small example of the accessible online library in India, which is called the Sugamiya Pustakale. It's a collaborative effort of the Government of India, the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, the Daisy Forum of India organizations, TCS, which is the private industry partner providing the platform. And this was possible because of the copyright amendment which took place in 2012 alongside the Marrakesh Treaty negotiations, which also India ratified. And WIPO has been playing also a huge role in pushing the production and transfer of accessible books through its various projects and through the Marrakesh Treaty implementation. So I think this is a really good start and an excellent example of how different stakeholders have been working together to promote greater access to ICTs. So with that, I'd like to conclude, and I'd be happy to discuss further during the interactive session. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Munar Simhan, for your excellent contributions. So one thing is very clear, that is only 60% policies, when it is formulated, ensure participation of people with disabilities. Even in those policies are not being implemented properly. So I think any policies affect people with disabilities because we are the part of the society. So I think from the disability movement, I think it is a humble urge to member states that please ensure participation of people with disabilities. Nothing about us without us. It is very, I think, helpful if you count our voice and our perspective, then that policy will be inclusive. Thank you. So now I am requesting Mr. Pursinen to initiate the interactive session.
First of all, let me thank all the panelists for their presentations. And distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we now move to the second phase of this roundtable. That is the interactive discussion between the panelists and delegations. As we informed you at the outset of the panel discussion, in the following segment of approximately 1 hour or so, there will be opportunities for delegations and other observers to request the floor to either pose specific questions to panelists or make a brief comment relevant to the current discussion in the roundtable. To make such requests, delegations, please do so by pressing your button. Delegates shall speak from their seats in the floor when their names are recognized. For accredited NGO and other participants, please submit your requests via email to address enable@un.org, copying to Zhang at the same address. When the names of your organizations are called by the chair, please proceed to the designated NGO speaker's seat and speak from that seat. When you take the floor, please first identify yourself and the title of the organizations you are representing. Please either pose specific questions to any of the panelists or make your brief comments relevant to the current discussion. Please do not read prepared statements as I am doing. You may speak for no more than 2, maximally 3 minutes with no exception. Now the floor is open to ask for the floor. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to recognize the delegation of United Arab Emirates as the first on my list. I kindly invite you to take the floor.
Should we turn it on? It's on. My name is Dr. Yusuf Al-Hamadi from United Arab Emirates. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Throughout our discussion today, we will explore how advanced technology can help to avoid missed opportunities and high costs when we fail to tap into the potential of 1 billion persons with disability. In UAE, our innovation-driven economy has helped us to thrive in a knowledge-based and a globalized world, and we are not stopping. Some may think that a digital world is fast approaching, but in reality, it is already here. And in UAE, we embrace and harness it in our path to the progress. Artificial intelligence and other assistive technologies presents us with an important opportunity so that we have a real shot at transforming our efforts for the full inclusion of persons with disability by the year 2030. Further, urbanization and technology are two powerful forces that are shaping global development and will require a dramatic rethinking of the way we finance and build our cities. In the UAE, close to 90% of our population lives in urban areas, and we have seen a 300% population growth in our cities over the past 15 years. Our national experience demonstrates that cities can become engines for both innovation and inclusive development. As such, we are deeply committed to ensure they are fully accessible to all persons with disabilities by further utilizing technologies such as AI, which is precisely the mandate of the Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence of the UAE. Accessible technologies and digital services are important building blocks for more connected, inclusive, and responsive city. Today in UAE, information and communication technology helps us to identify gaps and create solutions to issues ranging from environmental sustainability to safety and even to promote citizen happiness. E-services are being redesigned to enable equitable access for persons with disability and provide live data on urban performance. We are proud to host the World Expo 2020 in Dubai and working hard to ensure it is the most accessible, convenient of its kind to date. In the long run, we aim to elevate our government standards and delivery of services to new heights to ensure the effective participation of people of determination. In closing, allow me for the followings. First, on inclusion and agency, let us continue the discussion with persons with disability and older persons. Second, on data collection and analytics. In order to effectively leverage the data, we need to ensure it is disaggregated by disability. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, United Arab Emirates. As the next speaker on my list, there is Ukraine. You have the floor.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Valentin Hilic. I'm the General Director of Inclusiveness in Ministry of Education in Ukraine. Since 2016, thanks to the support of our President and the head of the parliaments and civic organizations of persons with disabilities, due to all of that, 1/4 of the schools received facilities for this. We made some changes in our country. The reforms that we are implementing for inclusive education include decentralization, new schools, and have given an opportunity. In spite of the military aggression of Russia, we have been able to make some substantive changes to make sure there's more inclusiveness in society. In 2018, we began from scratch an entire network of 600 resource centers, which have given us a possibility of including a medical component. More than 90% of our schools in Ukraine have access to internet, municipal internet. We've made a significant state investment in involving all centers into the internet system and given them computer capabilities in these schools. There's active teacher training to work with children and to do so with ICT. In many educational institutions, we are putting in new STEM systems and STEM laboratories, which have the equipment that they need to teach these categories of things, regardless of their technical level of development. The observatory gives us an opportunity to move forward the students, to give them photography and distance learning opportunities. Photography courses have given us, can be given in Braille as well. We also have a number of different robotized systems that help the students learn more and to design and to learn electronic systems, to do calculations and to make the first steps in computer programming. These robots are very good things to use in design. The independent work is what we stress with the children who have some kind of trauma. The robots can be put onto the smartphone and designed in different ways so they can be printed out as well. The interactive services obviously have many advantages. They give a comfortable environment to work in. It's not possible to dominate over someone if people can work independently. They're independent of others. They help train in the skills that are needed for this type of technical work. A great deal of work has been done and will continue to be done so that we can implement strategies for inclusive education in the 2020s and 2030s. We are doing this to ensure the greatest development of ICT for these students and to give them early access to these possibilities. Thank you very much.
Большое спасибо за
Thank you for that, Ukraine.
As the next speaker on my list, I have Qatar. The floor is yours.
Thank you. مها المنصوري الرئيس التنفيذي.
My name is Maha Mansouri. I work in the Qatari Center, which is specialized in technological solutions and takes into consideration digital aspects. I would like to thank you for this topic that we can discuss. I would like to as well comment on point one, the state's challenges, especially in terms of the Arabic language. There is a lack of these sources, technological sources in that language, and to process for text processing is there are some difficulties involved. I would like to talk a little bit about what we're doing in Qatar to deal with this problem. We have an innovation center, especially in digital questions and technology in the Arabic language. It's a center of excellence in the region to help us get the most updated information in the center. The discussions and consultations that we have with stakeholders and persons with disabilities are important. We see different categories of people as well. In addition to technology as per se, the NAFAD Center gives specialized access and provides an opportunity to update innovations in the technological realm and their different applications. The NADA portal offers support technology, auxiliary technology. It's the first of its kind in the Arabic-speaking world. The NADA portal offers technological solutions in the Arabic language that were not available before. Some grants are given to educate and to we want to help people understand the influence of technology, educate them on that. We have been able as well to come up with 32 technological solutions in addition to an Arabic language dictionary, which takes into consideration the different cultural conditions in the Arab world. We work to come up with an Arabic sign language dictionary. We are organizing annual conferences on technology and to see what are the most recent developments in this area. We would like for you to help us to make these changes and to come up with technologies in our language. Thank you.
Have the first statement by the NGO community, please.
Thank you, Mr. Now it's time for NGOs and DPOs to give your contributions. I am requesting European Union of the Deaf. Can you please give your contribution? Statement.
Dear Chair, delegates, European Union of the Deaf, organization representing deaf people on the European level, strongly believes that when applying universal design and developing ICTs that include features of importance for deaf users, such as customized vibrating, visual alerts, sign language, real-time captioning, translation options, and others, manufacturers and developers should directly collaborate with deaf experts and/or experts on accessibility for deaf persons that are recommended by organizations representing deaf people from the very early stages and throughout the entire process of developing accessible ICTs. This allows developers to recognize and avoid potential barriers from the beginning and at various points in the entire development process and deliver the product that is truly beneficial for the deaf user. Moreover, it is critical that representative organizations of deaf persons are involved in working with the government on policy development. This will support the creation of rules and practices that will encourage the consultation with the deaf user as well as their representative organizations, which in turn turn will lead to improving accessibility of ICTs for deaf people. Most importantly, for the deaf community, state parties to the UN CRPD must ensure end-to-end accessibility of telephony and emergency services. They must be reachable not only via voice communication, they must be available via text, including real-time text, video communication alone, or in combination as total conversation. State parties to UNCRPD must ensure full accessibility of audiovisual content and information that is provided by both public and private providers on TV, internet, including websites, social media, video on demand, including subscription models, and broadcasters. Deaf users must be able to choose sign language interpretation, subtitling, or captioning, or combination of both in their preferred language. EUD acknowledges that new technologies, including assistive technologies and technologies based on artificial intelligence, play a major role in improving full and equal participation of deaf persons in society. We advocate for new investments in research, design, development, production, and distribution of new technologies and systems to ensure that they become accessible at minimum cost. However, in order to ensure that new technologies benefit deaf persons and not create additional barriers, deaf experts and experts in accessibility for deaf persons that are recommended by organizations representing deaf people need to be constantly involved in the creation and updating of standards as well as policy making. Furthermore, they need to be strongly engaged with industry to ensure correct implementation of existing standards and policies to support the development of accessible, innovative practices. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now that's our second civil society statement will come from Santa Memorial Rehabilitation Center.
Your Excellencies, Chairman, panelists, and friends, I'm Asha Hans, representing Shanta Memorial Rehabilitation Center, a DPO from India. I thank all the states who have supported women with disabilities. My statement will be related to this topic. I draw your attention, however, to the exclusion of women with disabilities in the field of technology. Exclusion starts from school, and if gender disparity in education is there, so access to technology becomes impossible, as do high-tech jobs. Women's low visibility, their low mobility, and stereotyping exclude women with disability from technology. The most important to note is that one of the biggest barriers in this is gender-based violence, which happens within very high-tech homes or transportation that women with disability takes. So, to ensure inclusion, we request states to specifically provide inclusion in technology policies and programs, draw up specific strategies for inclusion of women with disabilities in using technology. States also need to take special measures to ensure that women with disabilities are protected from gender-based violence. To make the steps you make visible, it is important that gender disaggregated data be provided and provide specific inclusion in budget, without which we cannot achieve our goals. Finally, we request all states to engage with women with disabilities and their organization for women-friendly environment and technology. Thank you.
As the next speaker on my list, I have the delegation of Mexico. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and panelists. My name is Alfonso Hernandez. I'm the General Coordinator of User Policy from the Federal Telecommunications Institute for Mexico. Mexico
welcomes the valuable inputs from our panelists. We believe that our discussions on the role of technology, digitalization and ICT are extremely timely. We have a federal law on telecommunications and broadcasting, and this specifically promotes access to telecommunication and broadcasting services for persons with disabilities under equal conditions with other users. By way of an example, we have subtitles, doubling and sign language as to help those with who are hard of hearing. And this is available in the programs, one of the programs of each broadcaster throughout the country. At least 3 broadcasters are fulfilling this. One is public. The Institute of Telecommunications broadcasts the guidelines for accessibility to these services for those with disabilities, guaranteeing rights to persons with disabilities and promoting access to telecommunications services. By way of an example, obligations are established for companies working as concessions so that they have internet pages, equipment that's accessible, particular adaptations in the care centers, and a focus on other measures to help the disabled. Then Mexico also has a universal digitalization program, an intersectoral program to develop electronics and to help and strengthen the access of the disabled to the web. We now have strengthened the provisions for all companies, both public and private, when they deal with their websites and the digital content thereof. For example, Digital for All is a web accessible platform from the government, and it's one of the most accessible portals in the country. More than 2 million users have access, and there are about 30,000 items of information to help those with motor or hearing disabilities. Then we have international accessibility aids. When it comes to the convention and the use of technology and digitalization and information technologies, the Mexican government does recognize that more needs to be done in these areas. We would therefore like to know from the panelists, both men and women, what examples you have of good practice undertaken by states to do away with barriers that can have a negative effect on access to these technologies. And lastly, I'd like to say that the new government in Mexico is particularly interested in strengthening collaboration strategies and fortifying itself on the basis of the best experiences in order to improve technological services for persons with disabilities. I would like to conclude by saying that we are particularly interested in having links with states and intergovernmental organizations to help us to work together. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Delegación de México.
Thank you very much, Mexico.
On my list, I have Ireland. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman and panelists. My name is Siobhan Barron, and I am the Director of the National Disability Authority, which is a state agency with responsibility to provide independent advice to the government on disability matters. We also operate a Centre for Excellence in Universal Design, which promotes the universal design of the built environment, products, services, and ICT. Universal design is defined in national legislation to cover the design of all of those areas so that they're easy to use, access, and understand by everybody, regardless of their age, size, ability, or disability. It's very important as part of universal design that people with disabilities, older persons, that all persons are included in the design from the very outset of the process. and we work with industry and professional bodies to support them to that end. One of the areas we worked with recently involved working with a major banking organisation to assist it to understand that by engaging with people with disabilities and others from the early design of their online services, that they would have a better reach to customer and better customer engagement. They are now transforming their processes as a result. We are also currently engaged with the development of continued professional development for those who work in the technology sector. One of the key challenges for achieving universal design of public services is the challenge of accessing experts in the technology sector who understand universal design, who practice universal design, and who understand the accessibility standards. So this project will involve developing a learning process that can be rolled out by the Irish Computer Society to technology experts in Ireland, so that at the end of that process, when public sector bodies are purchasing expertise to improve their websites, to design their online services, that they will be able to avail of those, as I say, who understand universal design. And we look forward to sharing the learning of that project with others and also to benefiting from the learning from other jurisdictions too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ireland. As the next speaker, I invite Samoa. The floor is yours.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, congratulations to the panelists for their excellent presentations. My name is Fatino Tumapu. I'm the General Manager for the National Advocacy Organization of Persons with Disabilities and representing the Samoa delegation. Samoa agrees to what has been said of the significance of making sure that persons with disabilities are involved in the design, implementation, and also monitoring and evaluation of the production of technology. Samoa, through its National Advocacy Organization, continues to lobby for making sure that technology are produced with the involvement of persons with disabilities. At the Pacific level, the University of the South Pacific is well in place with technology to better support persons with disabilities who are studying at the university. With all this being said, financing the production of technology still remains a challenge for Pacific countries, given that they have very limited resources. Therefore, we are calling on, as a DPO for one of the DPOs for the Pacific, we are calling on all governments who are here to ensure that to keep true to the meaning of inclusive accessibility and technology, to ensure that there will be availability of resources in terms of funding support, so that we are able to give persons with disabilities the full enjoyment of their equal rights and fundamental freedom in the area of technology and ICT on an equal basis with others. I thank you.
Thank you, Samoa. As the next speaker on my list, there is Slovenia. The floor is yours.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sasha Mlakar, working at Ministry of Labour, Family, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities of Republic of Slovenia. New information and communication technologies, digital technologies and services are very important for persons with disabilities. They can enable better integration of persons with disabilities into society, offer larger accessibility, reduce barriers, and strengthen inclusion. Our society should dedicate even more attention to ICT and digitalization, and therefore helping persons with disability to acquire skills related to new technologies. Let us mention that recently developed project facilitating multimodal mobility for persons with various disability, with the objective to raise the quality of mobility for vulnerable groups with the use of advanced technologies. The project that will run until 2020 will bring together quality of life for vulnerable groups such as persons with disability, elderly persons, and families with children that use wheelchairs, and temporarily injured children and others. The long-term purpose of this project is to raise the quality of life for persons with various disabilities by implementing operational solutions and selected areas in Slovenia, which facilitate accessibility and safe movement in multimodal transport. Accordingly, safe routes must be suitably planned. The prerequisite to attain the objective is an active and regularly maintained data link layer for the mobility of persons with various disabilities. The system will provide a standardized, methodologically defined and harmonized model of data and metadata preparation as well as specified maintenance procedures. The establishment of such a system will be the basis of the efficient improvement of mobility for various groups of users. Another good practice to share is Smart House Iris from the University Rehabilitation Institute of the Republic of Slovenia that enables testing various assistive technologies and solutions that enable patients to have maximum functional independence and safety in a home environment. IRIS' objective is also to create possibilities to research and development in the fields of e-accessibility, e-inclusion, assistive technologies, ambient assisted living, Internet of Things, ambient intelligence, rehabilitation, engineering, and others. Mr. Chair, to conclude, let me also add that Slovenia is aware that policy decisions have an impact on daily lives of persons with disability.
Yeah. Thank you, Slovenia. And now we have the CSO.
Okay. At this moment now, I'll request a statement from two civil society organizations. So first I am requesting special talent exchange program from Pakistan. I can see Abia is there. Please, you give your statement.
Thank you very much. I'm Abia Akram from Pakistan. On behalf of the disability movement, I thank Mr. Chair for giving us the opportunity to highlight the concerns from the civil society organization and the representatives of the disabled people organization on the inclusive ICTs. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development committed to the inclusion of those who left behind and to reduce the risk or to economic, social, and environmental shocks. While the 2030 Agenda defined the SDGs, the CRPD that suggests how to achieve these goals for persons with disabilities from the right-based approach. We acknowledge the progress on the SDGs and the CRPD with key stakeholders, the supporters, especially the government, the UN, the CSOs. There is still a huge gap, especially with the implementation and monitoring of the inclusion of empowerment, equality in the changing world. Due to the barriers in accessing the built environment, information, and communication, persons with disabilities are denied access to basic services, especially the ICT, to achieve the safe, sustainable, and resilient societies for persons with disabilities, especially women and girls with disability. The realization of the 2030 Agenda must be undertaken by the complete implementation with the support of the state representatives on the national, regional, and global level. Since ICTs might be a luxury for the non-disabled people, but for persons with disabilities, especially the young people who are getting the education, it's a need. And further disaggregated data on the disability is needed to inform the national policy makers how the gaps and the challenges in the ICT to critically monitor both the inclusion of persons with disabilities in CRPD implementation. We also thought like disability rights are the human rights. It's not only having the policies in place, but the real implementation of the policy is critically important. The budget allocation for ICTs inclusiveness from the public-private partnership is also important, and the inclusion of the persons with disability in the high-level political forum to discuss about the inclusive ICTs is important to highlight in that forum also. And the organizations of the persons with disabilities, the DPOs, have a critical role to play. In order to ensure the full participation of the person with disabilities in the implementation of the CRPD, we need a commitment to the development justice, and we need commitment to the national laws and policies who are against protecting the discrimination and promoting equal opportunities. We urge the government, the state representative, to join hands for nothing about us without us.
Thank you, Abia. Very good contributions. Now I am requesting National Old Folks of Liberia, in collaboration with United Blind Association of your country.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, my name is Noah Zawu Gibson, and I represent the United Blind Association of Liberia in collaboration with the National Old Folks. Unfortunately, what is being discussed here, Liberia is seriously challenged when it comes to information technology. As I sit here, I want to continue on by appreciating this assembly for affording me such opportunity as I make a strong case for my colleagues. I appeal with this body that you work in collaboration with the United Blind Association of Liberia and the National Old Folks to develop programs to enable the disabled population of that country get on path with other countries that are far ahead. Because currently, the world is becoming very advanced, and Liberia is continually being challenged by the sad situation, the civil conflict left behind in that West African nation. So I want to make this recommendation that, number one, you work with the National Old Folks in collaboration with the United Blind Association to develop strong programs that will be able to put Liberia on path with other nations that are here. Of course, they outlined their challenges, but I think they made some tremendous progress ahead of Liberia. So I just want to appreciate this gathering, and I hope that this appeal will be taken into serious consideration as the United Nations strives to develop programs in terms of improving information technology in members' countries. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for the contribution from Liberian.
And as the next country on my list, I have United Kingdom. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much indeed. Everyone should be able to live full, independent lives in their community. So we want to provide personalized support to enable people to do the things they enjoy and to participate fully in society. Technology can help us to do this. The UK government values assistive technology, AT, as a tool that allows disabled people to live independently and enjoy the same opportunities for social participation and work as do people who do not have disabilities. So we have invested in access to work and the Disabled Students Allowance to ensure that those who need it get access to it. These schemes have helped drive a market for assistive technology by creating demand. In addition, the United Kingdom government has also supported research and development and innovation challenges to develop solutions to complex problems. For example, £725 million invested in the new Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund programmes, and around £500 million for what we call Innovate UK, to run competitions to develop innovations and technologies in areas like digital health and care. These have economic benefits for the United Kingdom in terms of developing our research expertise, taking research to market, and building a consumer market. However, the UK government also recognises the economic benefits and the importance of working together and sharing our thinking on the development of assistive technologies to realise our common goals for people with disabilities across the globe. The United Kingdom was a founding partner of AT-Scale, the Global Partnership for Assistive Technology. AT-Scale was announced at the Global Disability Summit in July 2018 and aims to reach 500 million more people with assistive technology by 2030. We recognise that this is a truly critical aspect of all that we're doing to support people with disabilities. And we're excited about the prospects for the future of supporting people with new and additional forms of assistance through assistive technology. So we're making good progress, but there's still far more we can do. And we hope we can share with others across the globe the intelligence that we're continually.
Thank you, United Kingdom. As next, I have a delegation of Malta. The floor is yours, please.
I thank the distinguished panelists for their contribution. I am Joseph Cini, CEO of Agencia Support. Agencia Support is Malta's national service provider for citizens with disability. We provide a number of services, from social work to residential and community care besides other services. But more importantly, we provide subsidized funding to acquire assistive devices, from hearing aids to wheelchairs to other ICT equipment. We further acknowledge the importance of ICT in Malta, so much so that as an agency we are looking at increasing the availability of assistive technologies by enlarging the current services being provided to children up to 16 years to over 16 years, which will involve training on use of assistive devices, recommendations as to which devices can be acquired, which best suit the citizen with disability. Moreover, in collaboration with ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, and EU, we shall be organizing the Accessible Europe Conference between the 4th and the 6th December in Malta. The conference will coincide with the CRPD Malta annual event celebrating the International Disability Week. During the conference, we shall be touch-basing on a number of items relating to ICT accessibility, not just for persons with disability, but also assistive devices to the elderly. At the end of the conference, we shall be organizing an award ceremony where persons who have made a difference to citizens with disability will be acknowledged for their efforts in this respect. So we are looking forward to welcome you to this conference in Malta. Thank you.
Thank you, Malta. And the next speaker is the delegation of Spain. The floor is yours, please.
Sí. Señor presidente, querido.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, I'm responsible from disabled policy in Spain, and I'd like to tell you what we've done to promote technology as a productive element for persons with disabilities. When it comes to the audiovisual realm, since 2010, we have a law requiring television channels using satellites to broadcast in a way that's accessible with transcriptions and sign language. The government also has a center for subtitles and transcription since this law to ensure that the required percentages are reached regarding accessibility. We look at quality of text, the speed, the content of the subtitles, the quality of the interpreters for sign language, and also the quality of the description. Then when it comes to the subjects and the scheduling of the programs that are accessible, this is a problem. Not all cultural programs are accessible, neither are programs that are on very late. We are starting, though, a review of this 2010 law, and we trust that we shall involve central social centres and groups working in Spain to improve accessibility for the disabled. Since September, we've had a decree on websites and mobile applications for the disabled. Although the government is making progress when it comes to devices in the private sphere and accessible devices for those with disabled, we have to review what is done under government policy. Today, many of the institutions have web pages from the administrations and government departments. We have a series of standards for accessibility in order to do away with barriers and which can help persons with disabilities to do anything administrative in the public sphere. We wish also to praise compliance and sanction failure to comply. We have also a centre for complaints for all of those who believe their rights have been violated because they're disabled. Annually, we see 90% of the complaints are about lack of accessibility for technological reasons in the technological sector. Thanks to this office, we also have a mechanism for sanctions, for punishment, which is applied by the Spanish government, and we've seen this applied to some significant web pages in the various sectors. I'm afraid the sound has gone. The interpreter cannot hear the speaker.
Muchas gracias, España.
Thank you very much, Spain.
As a speakers list, I have Namibia. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and also the moderator, and as well as the panelists. I would just like to share maybe the Namibian experience with you, that Namibia is fully aware that technology, digitalization, and ICTs for the empowerment of persons with disabilities are of the utmost best, and in the world that is changing. The Ministry of Information and Communication Technology is hard at work to articulate the comprehensive national digital policy and strategy framework that will illuminate the path for digital operations in Namibia and to keep the current momentum on digitalization. They will soon engage all stakeholders, both in the public and private sector, to generate a range of products and services that could be prioritized. The Division of ICT in the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture plays a crucial advisory role with the procurement of technology for children with disabilities, and they provide the quality assurance and support to the schools in Namibia. Thank you.
Thank you, Namibia. As the next speaker, I recognize Vice Chair of the UN Committee for CRPD, Mr. Montian Bhutan. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'm speaking on behalf of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We recognize the importance of accessibility in the use of ICT and digitalization, including assistive technologies. In 2013, the committee released its General Comment Number 2 on accessibility, which goes through the heart of the convention, explaining how accessibility could be achieved. The General Comment embraced the concept of universal design and the use of assistive technologies based on internationally recognized standards. The General Comment called for governments to utilize its public procurement policies and or legislation to enforce and promote or enhance greater accessibility. Yet, even several years after this General Comment was released, we continue to witness through constructive dialogue with several state parties that in many state parties there's still no recognized accessibility standards being fully implemented at the national level. Even there's still no sanction measures against those who fail to comply with such accessibility standards. Many times, national accessibility standards fail to be in line with internationally recognized accessibility standards, especially within the area of ICT accessibility. Without international accessibility standards being recognized and implemented at the national level, you end up seeing a lot of problems with regards to interoperability throughout the world. With regards to what we want to see, and we make a lot of comments and suggestions to state parties, that we want to see that state parties intensify its effort through legal and administrative measures to ensure that both incentives for accessibility compliance and sanctions against those who fail to comply are put in place and effectively enforced. And more importantly, the role of persons with disabilities, especially through their representative organizations, that should be able to participate in shaping how accessibility is ensured, especially in this digital world. I'd like to end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay. Now, I'm requesting the last civil society contributions or statement. The organization is Vision Australia. Please give your statement.
Good afternoon, everybody. Distinguished guest, chairman, and panelist. My name is Santiago Velasquez, and I'm part of the Australian delegation, and I'm representing Vision Australia. Over the past few days here at COSP12, we have been speaking about how important the use of technology is to enable people with disabilities to take part in our society. For those of you who cannot see, I am vision impaired. The reason why I bring this up is we've been talking about nothing about us without us, but one key point that we have not made is encouraging people with disabilities to pursue degrees in the STEM fields. I studied electrical engineering in the past, and I'm sad to say that the people around the world who have pursued degrees such as mine, who have a disability, are very few. If we're designing technology to be accessible, we should encourage those who have lived experience to take their lived experience and design it in such a way that not only benefits us with disabilities, but it also benefits the broader community. We're talking about making accessible technology affordable. And when it's a niche product and when it does not have any other uses outside of our community, we're all at a disadvantage. Nothing without us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your very good comments, focusing lived experience on designing accessibility or digital technology.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to invite all our panelists to make their final remarks or responses to the interventions. I suggest 1 up to 2 minutes for each panelist. We might go in the reverse order, so we start with Madam Narasimhan. Is that suitable for you, please?
I'd like to congratulate all the member states for their commitment and the work they've been doing on accessibility. But the fact is it's not enough, and that is why we're still here. I would like to emphasize the need to work with persons with disabilities to ensure that accessibility and universal design is ingrained in the system. It does not belong to one ministry. It does not belong to one policy. It belongs in every domain, whether it's education, it's health, it's finance, it's telecom. So it's important to work with persons with disabilities who are key stakeholders, who can help guide the policy-making process and to implement it. It's equally important having the policies to have the capacity to implement them and to find the resources through universal service obligation or any other ways. There have been multiple examples, like UK gave, and I think solutions need to be identified for each country. There are global solutions, but for each country, just like technologies, we have to customize or find a way to create technologies which work for our resource environment or our regional or cultural environment. These are things we have to do, and it's really good that if to see all the countries committed and to see how we should continue working on this issue. I'd like to also conclude by just drawing attention to the Marrakesh Treaty to facilitate access to copyrighted works for persons with disabilities, which is another UN treaty which came into force some years ago, and that would really help open up the world of accessible books to persons with print disabilities in your countries. And if your countries haven't signed it, that would be one recommendation which should go from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Narasimhan. And then Mr. Thurston, please.
Thank you very much. I would also like to applaud all of you for the commitment and really some of the very innovative approaches that you're taking in your countries to think about technology and how we are deploying it and how we can be developing more and more accessible technologies and deploying them more broadly. Just a few things that I'd like to mention and maybe emphasize. We heard quite a bit about data and technology today, and I want to mention that one of the tools that we've started deploying that may be of interest based on some of what we heard from your statements today is a maturity model, an assessment tool that actually allows us to look at how our cities today, and ultimately perhaps other organizations, other levels of government, but today cities, how are they using data and how are they using technology specifically to close the digital divide? It's a tool that has multiple variables. It's a quantitative tool that allows for benchmarking against other cities as well. And a cornerstone of that work is data, which we heard a lot about today, and the need to recognize that people with disabilities today throughout the world are a bit of a data desert, that we don't have enough disaggregated data about people with disabilities, and we aren't using data effectively like we are in other ways in smart cities, for example, to develop new programs and policies. So I would encourage you to take a look at that tool and think of as a way to assess perhaps where your city is today in terms of being a smarter city. I'd also like to just echo the point, some of the points that we heard about more intergovernmental cooperation. I think there's an absolute need for sharing good practices like we were doing today, but in a more regular way. And one of the things that I also would point you to is, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the G3ICT actually, there is an international professional society around accessible technology called the IAAP, the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. It does what professional societies do in other areas as well. It does training, it does certification, but it also does identifying and sharing best practices when it comes to accessibility and technology for people with disabilities. So I would encourage you to take a look at that as well. There are communities of practice within that professional society, for example, one specifically around universities in higher education that want to be better at leveraging technology for their students with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, and Madame Placencia.
Thank you. Of course, a lot of what has been said by my colleagues is really, I agree fully with what they have said, but let me highlight a number of issues. First, I'm really convinced of the transformative power of legislation. So I would say we need to invest on legislation and have clear rules that are having obligations and rights very well spelled. Second, in order to do that legislation, we don't need to start from scratch. There are resources around the world. Some of my colleagues have mentioned them. We also have excellent models in several countries. We also learned from them when preparing the European Accessibility Act. Third, joint international efforts in order to have standards that use those standards which are available. They are publicly available, and they contain details on how to implement accessibility. Fourth, when we have set up the rules, the legislation and the policies, we need to implement. And in order to do that, we need to enhance capacity of professionals. For doing that, training is our next priority. Training engineers, training the private sector, but also training the public sector, procurers and those that have to enforce ICT accessibility. Also training users so that they are able to use all those features that we are requiring to have in our products and services. 5, I would just ask everybody to be vigilant, invest in research and technology and technological development so that new areas maintain accessibility or introduce accessibility requirements. And finally, an invitation to all of you to come tomorrow at the end of the afternoon to a panel that we are organizing with the European Disability Forum to discuss ICT public procurement, and accessibility. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Madam. And I hope that we still have Mrs. Matsinen online from Finland.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. I would like to thank all the countries and all the NGO representatives as well as my fellow panelists for the contributions. It has been really excellent and interesting. When I think of the 3 topics that I already raised in my speech, I think that when we talk about disability, we often forget that people aren't just persons with disabilities. We are people who are women, men, we are mothers, we are daughters, we have all these different layers of identities. And when we talk about access to technology, it's not only the impairment or the disability that hinders us from accessing technology, but it's actually all these other identities as well. And therefore, part of the solutions are also intersectional. We need to talk about multiple discrimination, and we need to figure out how women with disabilities can access technology despite their disability, but also despite the gendered practices in different countries and different cultures. When it comes to access to services, I was very happy to hear from the floor some people highlight that it's crucial, utmost crucial to have persons with disabilities in the tables where technology is developed, because if we are not there, we will always be the afterthought to technology. It is important to create spaces where persons with disabilities can study and become professionals when it comes to technology and design. And when it comes to data, I am a keen fan of all sorts of regulation on national and international level. At the same time, I do think that a lot of the modern technology also takes place and shape in spaces that are not national or international as we understand it. There's technologies or solutions such as the blockchain that sort of exceed all the boundaries and all the arenas where we discuss these issues, and that's something that we need to address. How do we increase the awareness of accessibility and the potential of persons with disabilities in terms of technology and in terms of taking an active role in society, also in those spaces that
Madam
do
Matsinen,
not
please
confine
note the time.
to
We
national
have
boundaries.
to wrap up in 2 minutes the whole session.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And now for the wrap-up.
Thank you, Mr. Pustinen. I think very good presentation from the panelists, and also contribution from the member states and disability organizations. I am now presenting the summaries. There's some key points. So we have finished the roundtable on technology, digitization, and ICT for empowerment of and inclusion of people with disabilities just now. So we have heard about many barriers that persons with disabilities still face in accessing technology. So technology can empower persons with disabilities, but also poses risk. It can cause discrimination and increase the digital divide. Many speakers emphasize the need to develop legislation and standards on accessibility, training program for ICT professionals, to consider universal design, to involve persons with disabilities in identifying and producing enabling technology, and to enhance access to affordable technology. The growing development of technology does not have to make the digital divide worse, and we have learned about promising initiatives at the national level. And from my experience, that is, universal design is necessary, but it is not enough. We need resources to implement those things. Inclusive policy is essential, but we need people to push the inclusive agenda in terms of technology, education, employment, or any other issues that affect people with disabilities. So we need to empower people with disabilities so that that issue can be laid and forward so that we can have an inclusive society. So thank you, distinguished panelists, delegates for participation in this fruitful discussion. And I'm very much pleased co-chairing with Mr. Pekka Pustinen. He's a nice man. We met first time, but I think we'll take this issue forward. So he told not last time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for the good co-chairman. Also like to thank all our distinguished panelists, all delegates, participants from civil society and the United Nations system, and of course our thanks go also to the Secretariat, notably DESA, all our interpreters, card service providers and sign language interpreters. And now I announce the roundtable formally concluded. Thank you so much.